Hey friends, and welcome to the Adventures of Blink. I'm of course Blink, and you can find my blog right here. If you find this content to be useful, helpful, or even just plain fun, leave me a like. That lets me know that the content hit the mark and you're enjoying yourself. And if you're really looking for more, if you really want to follow along, make sure you hit subscribe as well. That way you can get notifications of any upcoming episodes as they roll out. So today we're going to continue working on the Gilded Rose example. We started this journey by building a unit test suite so that we had some protection against behavior changes that we didn't intend to make while we were trying to clean up the code. Once we had the guardrails in place, last week we were able to actually do the refactor. And that was really exciting to see just how much cleaner we could make things, how much more readable and how much more understandable, and just better organized the code became. And as it turns out, we've still got some work to do. So let's take a look at our status for a second here. First of all, README and docs. This is still showing up in yellow. We still have minimal documentation in place. It's accurate, but it's not very useful. Hopefully we'll dig into some of that today. The next thing we're going to look at is set up and install. We had the broken test suite that we fixed. And we have some, easy to install dependency things, but generally speaking, we haven't really looked at this, so I left it in yellow as well. We do have good tests and coverage. We took care of that. That's a green light for us, a big win in our books. And we have code clarity after last week. We took care of the modularity problems that we had. We added a few comments, but there's still some work that could be done there potentially, I guess. I don't know. I was willing to give it a green light just because of the massive jump forward that we made. The next thing is tooling in DX. So DX stands for, of course, developer experience. This is about making sure that we have created an environment that it's easy for a developer to pick up the code base. We're going to look at some of that today too as well. And then onboarding speed. We still have a red light for this, mostly because we haven't actually done any work in the space. So we're going to be looking at how to make it so that a new developer could pick up the code base and contribute to it quickly. In summary, it's nice to see some green lights on the board. I think we're making a huge difference and we feel like we're making progress. But where do we go from here? So today's focus is about getting the project ready to hand it over. Developers talk a lot about the idea how ownership is eternal. Once you touch the code, it's yours. It's like playing tag when you were a kid, right? You're it, and now it's yours, and you are going to maintain this code forever. And I believe that this is why. We never actively prepare to hand things over to the next developer. Typically, the way a project like this would run, if this was an actual business that had us contracted to do some work, the business is paying to get their features implemented as fast as possible, and the handover is just sort of waved away. We would look at that and go, we don't really have the time or money to put into a good developer experience on this. We just want to hurry and get it done. I personally believe that's a huge mistake because it sets us up for a failure in the long run. Yeah, sure, we got a bunch of features in now, but we have an unmaintainable spaghetti code mess that you and I dug through last week. The path of least resistance just runs back to me, though. And so if I build in a way that doesn't make it maintainable by others, then the responsibility is always going to return to me. So for this episode, we're going to take some time to build out the things that make a project able to be handed off to someone else. Let's take a look. All right, so we're taking a look here on the screen at my project, and this is what we've been working in for the past few weeks, so everything's right where I left it last week when we finished up our refactor. But today what we're going to be talking about is mostly the stuff that was in that section of our status report about README and docs. We'll also talk a little bit about tooling in DX, but we're going to start with README and docs because I feel like it should come first. The reason I say that is because README and docs are a much lighter lift than building a bunch of tooling. And so if you have a choice between writing some things down and building a whole bunch of stuff, writing some things down is going to be a lighter weight task, and it's going to be something that you get some wins for up front. So if we can make that go green first, then maybe we can get some help doing some of the other implementation stuff in a team setting. Obviously, today it's not going to matter too much because there's just Blink doing the work. But that's the way that I would think about this in the context of a team of developers or inside of an organization that's trying to build something, that I want to make sure I get quick wins up front and use those to sort of snowball into the larger wins later. It's a strategy that helps you be successful. Because it keeps the attention of your leadership on what you're doing and helps them follow along and realize the value of it. If they go long periods of time without hearing from you, then they're like, why are we paying those guys? I don't think anything's getting done over there. And you might be working on something, vital to the future of the company, but if you're not communicating it well, it's never going to have the effect that you hope for. So let's take a look at this and see what we can do to start cleaning up and getting some of those quick wins in terms of documentation. So we'll open up the README here, and you can see that this README is actually I'm probably scrolling too fast for you to read there. But the README as it's written today is very much focused on the idea of using this as a practice kata. So the coding stuff here is just enough to get you started and to set up the scenario for, hey, this is the Gilded Rose exercise. What we want to do instead, I'm going to re-envision this README as something that's now for an actual product. So I'm going to push all of this stuff down to the bottom because I don't really care about it. I'm not going to delete it because I think it's important to keep in here in context of the Gilded Rose, but we're going to pretty much imagine that everything at that Gilded Rose starting position in Python line, everything from there down doesn't exist anymore. We're just going to pretend. But let's go on ahead and start building this out. So the Gilded Rose. Things that we would want to have in here. I'm just going to start making the outline, and I'm not going to waste your time watching me type the entire README, but I want you to think through the layout of your README and what it is that you're expecting to present to people. So that's what we're really going to focus on for this part. The first thing that should show up here is a very short summary. And so this is going to be, one paragraph, 4 to 5 sentences. I wouldn't do a lot more than that. You just want to set the stage for what's going on with your app to help people understand it. The next thing that I would have is setting up your workspace. And this would be, actually I should probably say your dev workspace, because what we're going to do is put in all the instructions for how a developer workspace using this app would be configured. After that, we're going to talk about testing your changes, and that's going to be the section that explains how our testing strategy is set up and what's available to use and what's not. There would be a section for caveats. So anything weird or wild that we've learned along the way, hey, if you run the testing suite with this kind of data, there's something strange that happens. Ideally, we would fix anything like that so that the tests behave, very plainly and boring. But overall, we want to make sure that there's stuff out there. And then there would be a section for contact info where you might say, hey, these are people you could reach out to that could help you with this part or that part. And so what I'm going to do now is sort of wave my magic finger here and poof, now we have a better README. We took just a minute to fill in those spaces, and you can see we've got a quick description. I kept it as short and sweet as I could. I wanted to make sure that there's enough information to connect people with the bigger work that's it. at play here. And then I wanted to get out as fast as possible. So just real quick to make sure we're all on the same page, and then we move in. Let's go look at setting up your dev workspace. In order to use the Gilded Rose app locally, you'll need to establish a virtual environment. It walks you through that, gives you the commands, everything's laid out neatly. The idea here is to make this document very accessible. Now, I've got a plugin for my VS Code here that does previews. And so let's take a look at the actual README, like rendered, so that you'd see like what would show up in GitHub if you posted it there or something like that. So this is what you would expect to see when you pop onto the page. And it walks through. You'll notice that when I did these code block commands, I always preface it with what language I'm working in. And the reason is because syntax highlighting in Markdown is really useful, just to make it more colorful, to help somebody relate to what they're seeing and sort of separate that out. Syntax highlighting is the bomb. So, that's what we do. We get down to the testing our changes, and we can see, here's how you run a Python unit test. And then there's some instructions. These I actually pulled in from the original README. There was some good stuff in there that I wanted to be able to bring to the surface. It's stuff that we didn't really work on because we weren't looking at the full Gilded Rose experience. We're just talking about the refactoring. And so there's a whole thing in here about being able to run test simulations and do multiple day simulations of what goes on in the Gilded Rose. This stuff's available in here. If you want to go play with it, you might find some fun things to work on and some fun things to learn about, and maybe get some ideas for your own projects about how you would provide testing examples to folks who might want to pick up and contribute to your project. So I scroll down here to caveats, and you can see I don't have any to speak of currently, but I wanted to make the document feel inclusive. One thing that I've personally noticed in the industry is a lot of developers want to think of documentation as someone else's problem. They're like, okay, if you need documentation, you go do it. I'm just going to work on code. And it's a wrong approach, but what they really need is someone to invite them in and make them part of the process. So anytime that I get that opportunity to sort of nudge somebody and say, hey, if you know something that's not in this doc, hit me up. I want it to get included here. And it keeps us from having to ask each other a bunch of questions repeatedly and things like that, just to have the information out here available where everybody can see it. I put my blog information in there as my contact info. Of course, you could do whatever you wanted with that space, but the idea is to, again, create space for dialogue. It's cool that we have documentation, but there's always going to be a case where you go, I'm not really feeling what's in this doc. I need to talk to somebody who knows what's going on here. And that's the way a README should work. We're improving the README just by making a few little things happen. You'll also notice liberal use of like hyperlinks and things throughout it. That's important information. Most of the systems like GitHub, GitLab will give you the ability to hyperlink in a README like directly to the file in the code or something like that, where you have the ability then to point them at what they're doing. And there's even places that you can start to learn about how to highlight certain line numbers. In GitHub Markdown, for instance, I know that there's a way to do that. I'm pretty sure GitLab does it as well. But having those kinds of hyperlinks make it so that you're helping somebody understand the code. And that's what we really want to achieve. We don't want them to go, oh, well, here's some stuff, good luck. We want to sort of handhold them through it as part of what's in the README, because you never really know how much of it they've fully understood yet. So that's a good bit about READMEs. Let's look at some other stuff that we can do to help the documentation of our system. The next thing I would go back to is in the Gilded Rose code itself. We can actually see we didn't put that many comments into what we were doing. There's a little bit of a note here and there, just a couple of things, but it's really important to take the time to write some of this out. And here's why. because not everybody just looks at code and translates it into English, or whatever your language of choice is. We don't do that often. There are some people who do it, who can just sort of look at that and go, oh yeah, I totally understand what's going on now. But most of us have to take some time to decipher the behaviors. And so what we want to do is make it so that our comments help people translate things in their head. For instance, in the constructor for the class, I might say something like, the only class variable we manage today is a collection of items that represents the inventory. And you could totally tell that. I mean, that we've been working in this code for a couple of weeks now. You've seen it. It's no surprise. But if this was the very first time you read this page, if this was the first time you'd looked at this class, you would want somebody to have left a note here along the way that explains it. The same goes for handling aged brie. So aged brie is relatively unique in the inventory because it increases in value as it approaches its sell-in date. It can never go above a quality of 50, however. And see, it's just these simple things that we put in here that help someone translate what they're seeing. Another way that I've actually seen this done is to take the specific project requirements, if they're itemized, like a bulleted list sort of thing, or if they're in a numbered list, even works better. You can actually say requirement 1.6 is addressed by this, and this is what it says, and this is why we did it. Anything that helps somebody relate to what's going on here. Handle a backstage pass, so the same kind of thing. Backstage passes grow more rapidly in value when they are close to the concert date, but the value drops to 0 after the concert is over. And see, that gives somebody just enough context to be able to look at this and go, oh, look, so if it's less than 11, so if it's 10 and under, then it's going to go up by 1. If it's 5 and under, it goes up by another 1. And so you can sort of stack it up that way. And I said that wrong. It goes up by 1 all the time. It goes up by 2 if it's less than 10 days, or if it's less than 11 days. And then it goes up by 3 if it's less than 6 days. And that gives you the ability then to more quickly interpret what you're seeing on the screen. Update quality. So every item changes, or I shouldn't say that. I should say items generally change in quality by 1. Reduce in quality by 1 each day until the sell-in date, when they start reducing by 2. There are exceptions to this which have their own handling methods. So that's how you would fix the documentation for the Gilded Rose, just to add more context, to make a little bit more human readable text in here so that somebody can go, what's this code about? Okay, I now have something I can grab onto. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is how to make code standards available for me and for my team to be able to operate with. And so for the example on this, I've picked something called pylint. It's pretty much the ubiquitous way to do what we call linting in Python. Linting is a practice where we have a script that checks the way we've written the syntax out, and it looks for things like spacing and some of the more cosmetic things that can make our code readable. So we're going to take a look at what to do for a blank project that we need to install pylint. So actually, I'm going to install pylint at the global level. You could probably just set it up for one project if that's what you wanted. But for me, I would rather have it at the global level because it starts encouraging me, regardless of what Python I'm writing, to follow the same rules in every case. So we're going to go on ahead and set this up. The first thing I'm going to do is deactivate and get out of the virtual environment for the moment. So you can see now I no longer have the .venv decoration, and I'm going to do a pip install, typos there, pip install pylint. And so for this installation part, I'm going to expand my terminal for us here, and we can see, okay, it's bringing in all the things. Oh, and I've got a pip upgrade. So I'll go on ahead and do that while I'm sitting here because it's always important to keep your software up to date. The longer you go without doing that, the harder it is to catch back up later on. After the installation, I'm ready to just run pylint and get it to do things. So what you do is pylint, and then you feed it the name of your module. So in this case, I'm doing gilded rose.py. And let's see. And we get a laundry list of things that it wants to fix. So here's what it's found. Pylint does not like trailing white space. It also wants module doc strings. We talked a little bit about those when we were writing tests, that we wanted to have that string in there to explain specific behaviors and things like that, like what does this method do kind of documentation. You'll also see some other stuff. Let's start working through this. So the first thing I actually want to do is get it so that my editor is going to respect pylint for me, and it's going to include that. So funny enough, as I was fiddling with this, getting ready to show you, the syntax highlighting and like redlining of my application started happening automatically. But I want to show you how you would configure that as well. So I went back and cleaned everything up, and for some reason it's still remembering them, so I can't make them go away without actually solving the problems, but we'll get started on this way. And here's what you do. You go to your extensions, and I looked for pylint. And so because I wanted to install pylint, I did the install button, and you can see it popped right in there. And as soon as I do that, now I start seeing these highlights, and these will match what's in my pylint output. So I can run pylint from the command line to verify things, or now my editor is configured to run pylint on my behalf and keep my screen up to date with what's in here. So I get these handy little color-coded badges along the way to say this is where your problems are. So the first one is go fix the module doc string. So I'm going to pop in here and I'm going to say Gilded Rose class. Keeping it short and sweet today. Obviously, you could write out a lot more there to give somebody some context, particularly if the Gilded Rose class is being called by something else, then you want to highlight how it works in the larger scheme of things. But that's where you would put that documentation. For now, I'm just trying to clean up things and get to the point where I have a clean editor again. So now I see class doc string is missing. So same kind of thing. Contains inventory of the gilded rows. Okay, so when I hit save, it didn't make my red line go away. There's another problem here. So if I highlight it again, I see class gilded rows inherits from object, can be safely removed from bases in Python 3. And so let's take a look at what VS Code thinks it can do about it. At this point, it can tell us to ignore it, or it can send us to the Pylint website to get more information. So this would be one of those things that as I'm doing my linting, I could check using my unit tests to see if I had broken behaviors. But for now, I'm just going to tell it to ignore this one. And then let's see if we can get further down this list. So the next thing here is missing a function or method docstring. And it's doing this, it seems like I would have one here, except that this isn't in the docstring format. This is just in regular comment format. So what we would do instead is wrap this in triple quotes, and we can get rid of these actual comment lines. And that should take care of that. Now I see this has an edit on it. And this is a case where Pylint is giving me some optimization advice. It says you have an if and an else, but they both just return something. So if the if returns, then you don't actually need to say else. You just need to exit the if and fix your tab line there. So I can do that, and that cleans up the lint. Technically, it makes my code a little bit smaller, and I have a hard time remembering all of the detail on this, but I believe that that actually saves a little bit of time in terms of run times. So the code runs just a bit faster because it doesn't have to figure out where that else is and do the location handling for it when it compiles. All right, so now we're down here to this one. This is going to be a docstring situation, and let's just do that, and that clears that out. This also has the same if-else situation. So one of the cool things about doing this is you actually pick up some techniques for how to make your code a little bit better just by using the linter. And this is absolutely messy, I know. All right, and our next one is down here. It says trailing white space. So linters do not like us to leave spaces on things. They want the code to be left with as little white space as possible. They don't like it trailing. Like if you leave an extra space on the end of a line, it will complain about it and say you left an extra space out there. So it really wants it just to be code and tabs as much as possible. All right, and then we have a thing down here about a class docstring. So we can put that in there, and then it's also complaining that there are too few public methods. This is one that we're going to just set to ignore because I'm actually not going to implement anything else in the Gilded rows right now. I don't know why it decided not to do that. Well, let's go on ahead and add that manually just so we can make it go away. So this is called, you can see here, too few public methods. So what we're going to do is up here at the top of our file, we're just going to do Pylint : disable equals too few public methods. And that clears the error. We're just ignoring it. So we're telling Pylint that we don't care about that one right now. This file doesn't need to worry about that. All right, and that leaves us with, I see 2 yellow lines here. So we missed one back up here, which this has a trailing white space error. So that's easy to fix. And then this return line says formatting a regular string, which could be an F string. So in Python, this is doing string formatting in a way that Pylint doesn't prefer us to do it. It would rather us do this format. So what we're going to do is put an F before the string, and then we're going to say self.name. Self.sellIn. Oops, I forgot my braces there. Self.quality. And then you don't need that on the end. And so that simplifies it. That's fewer characters, I guess, and it makes it more apparent what you're actually doing instead of having to worry about the format of the string. There we go. We've made our edits. We've cleaned up the code as far as Pylint is concerned, and we now have a tool built into our editor that's going to be checking behind us to make sure we keep things clean syntactically. This is really helpful because it keeps us consistent in the way we do things. It's very easy to, as you're coding, just sort of do something and then, oh yeah, that worked, I'll leave it the way it is and not go back and do it properly because you're just trying to bang out an idea, right? In this case, we're now training ourselves to keep things consistent and orderly, and consistent and orderly are great because when I share the code with somebody, they don't have to decipher how I was feeling that day. They just have to know, oh, look, he's writing this in Python, he's following Pylint rules, so that's what we have to work with. You can also add Pylint into a GitHub action, for instance. If you were going to let GitHub give you a continuous integration path, you're going to build a workflow that was going to build your project and run the tests and all that stuff. You could build that out so that it also installs Pylint in the action and makes sure that the rules pass. And then you can make that a check on a pull request so that when you open a pull request to the project, it suddenly runs Pylint and makes sure that everything that's coming in follows the rules. It's greatly valuable for team collaboration because then you have multiple people who are all submitting consistent code. It all looks the same, it all feels the same. And that's really important for readability later on. So there you have it. We did some README work to clean up that documentation. We added some comments to the code to help people understand it in human language instead of just seeing clean, concise Python. And we added Pylint as a way to make sure our formatting is consistent as we write our Python code. What's cool about this is we probably also fixed a lot of our onboarding speed issues for a new developer by virtue of fixing those things. So we get a lot of credit for a little bit of work. And that's the kind of thing you want to keep in mind. When can I do work that will benefit me in multiple ways down the road? So that's going to wrap up this episode of The Adventures of Blink. I hope that you have gained a new appreciation for some of the developer experience things that we need to work on with every project. This kind of thing makes coding more fun. And I know it feels tedious at times because, oh, we're adding these tools that get in the way, we're adding rules that we have to follow, we're making things harder. Isn't this kind of gatekeeping? Well, no. What it's doing is making things safer and more consistent so that we can focus on the cool stuff, which is building something amazing. We'll see you next time. I hope you have a good time coding.